Dad takes son for a haircut and calls the police after seeing what was on the boy's head. The distant chimes of the Holy Name Cathedral echoed in lonely intervals, slipping through the foggy glass windows of a small barbershop tucked on the corner. Lucy's barbershop on Clark Street. The bell above the barbershop door jingled softly. Lucy looked up from the front desk. A tall man, thin but solid, walked in wearing a worn dark gray coat, clutching the hand of a small boy. It was Samuel, a regular customer, though not a friendly one. Walking beside him was Daniel, about 8 years old, scrawny, the sleeves of his sweater stretched well past his hands. "Good morning," Lucy greeted gently. Samuel gave only a curt nod, no smile. He glanced around the shop with a measuring look before gently nudging Daniel toward the empty chair by the middle mirror. "Just trim it short. Shave the neck. Keep it out of his eyes." Lucy walked over and glanced at Daniel. The boy sat quietly, saying nothing. His hair reached the nape of his neck, greasy and matted in places, like it hadn't been washed in a long time. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He slouched into the chair, avoiding eye contact with the mirror. "Hi, Daniel. How are you today, sweetheart?" Lucy said warmly. The boy just gave a small shrug. When she draped the haircut cape over his shoulders, his hands trembled slightly. Lucy noticed his fingertips were red and swollen, with several nails broken close to the skin, as if bitten or scratched forcefully. A faint, strange odor lingered. It was hard to tell whether it came from his hair or scalp. Lucy picked up her scissors and began cutting gently and carefully. But when she lifted the hair at the back of his neck, she froze mid-breath. Beneath the thin layer of hair was a large, inflamed sore red, oozing yellow pus. The skin around it was peeling, scraped, and bruised. A subtle but unmistakable smell of infection rose. "Oh my God," Lucy whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Daniel flinched, immediately lifting his hand to scratch, but Lucy quickly caught his wrist. The boy furrowed his brow, eyes downcast, lips pressed tight. Samuel stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes glued to his phone. Lucy turned around. "Mr. Samuel, this is not okay. That wound is badly infected. Have you taken him to a doctor?" Samuel didn't look up. "Just a rash. Kids scratch themselves all the time." "It's not just a rash. It's infected. It's oozing pus. It could spread." He sighed, shaking his head. "Miss Lucy, please. I didn't come here for a diagnosis. Just cut the hair." Lucy bit her lip. She glanced down at Daniel. He was sitting stiffly, hands clenched tightly. A crusted patch of pus cracked open as she gently dabbed it with a wet cloth. "Does that hurt, Daniel?" she asked softly. The boy shook his head, but his eyes were red. "Daddy said, if I cry, I'll get in trouble," Daniel whispered without looking up. Lucy froze, her hand trembling. "Mr. Samuel, I'm serious. You need to take him to a doctor. This is medical neglect. It's dangerous to his health." Samuel huffed. "Here we go again. You and your need to meddle. I told you it's not serious. I put ointment on it. I wash it with salt water. It heals naturally." Lucy lowered her voice, struggling to stay composed. "You're his father, how can you be so careless? Look at his hands, broken nails, circles under his eyes. He hasn't been sleeping, has he?" The boy said nothing, but his fists tightened even more. Just then, a regular customer, Mrs. Eleanor Morris, in her 60s, walked in and stopped in her tracks at the scene. "Lucy, what's going on? That little boy, he doesn't look okay." Lucy glanced at her, then back at Samuel. "Can you wait here while I finish his haircut, and I'll call someone who can help? Please. For Daniel's sake." Samuel straightened abruptly, voice louder. "You trying to interfere in my family now? I'm his father. I can take care of him." "Take care." Lucy's voice grew firm. That boy looks like he's been suffering with that wound for a week. Do you even understand the risk of sepsis? Lucy! Samuel nearly shouted. Eleanor stepped back in alarm. The air in the shop was taut as wire. Daniel shrank into the chair, coughing softly, his breath wheezing. Lucy inhaled deeply, turned around, and silently pulled her phone from her pocket. She typed a short message to Carlos, her friend who worked as a local police officer, possible child medical neglect. At the shop. Come now. Samuel noticed the movement. Did you just call someone? Lucy faced him. If you won't take Daniel to the hospital, I will. Don't act high and mighty, Lucy. You're just a hairdresser. Don't pretend you know anything. And you, she said, voice steady, are a father ignoring a serious threat to your child's life. The shop was dead silent. Eleanor leaned against the wall, tense. The doorbell rang again. Carlos entered, wearing his police jacket. He scanned the room. Samuel Jenkins? Carlos said firmly. Samuel turned, stepping back. I didn't do anything wrong. My kid has a rash, that's it. Don't blow it out of proportion. Carlos approached, signaling to Lucy. Can I take a look? Lucy nodded and gently lifted the hair at Daniel's nape. Carlos frowned, his face growing serious. The child has signs of acute skin infection. He needs medical treatment immediately. I suggest you cooperate. Samuel growled, you people think you can just take my kid? Lucy placed a hand gently on Daniel's shoulder. No one wants to take anyone, Samuel. But if you won't do what's right, someone else will. Daniel began to tremble. His cheeks flushed, forehead damp with sweat. He leaned forward as if about to vomit. Dad, Daniel whispered, I feel sick. Carlos immediately pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services. We need an ambulance at Lucy's barbershop on Clark Street. 8-year-old male. High fever. Serious skin infection. Lucy held Daniel close as he shivered in her arms. It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here. I won't let you hurt anymore. The boy didn't respond, just leaned into her, eyes fluttering shut. Samuel said nothing. His eyes darted around, searching for an exit, but Carlos stood firm, blocking the door. Lucy remained by Daniel's side as paramedics wheeled a stretcher into the shop. The boy lay limp, forehead soaked with sweat. A nurse, Isabel, bent down to check his temperature. High fever, she murmured. Lucy squeezed the small, cold hand lying in hers. Carlos turned to Samuel, voice stern. You need to cooperate. Your son's life is at risk. Samuel jerked his hand from his coat pocket, eyes angry. I told you it's just a mild fever. Kids get sick all the time. You're treating me like a criminal. Nurse Isabel winced as she examined the sore on Daniel's neck. It's full of pus. About 2 inches wide. The epidermis is deteriorating. He's been in pain for days. Lucy couldn't hold back anymore. She spun around to glare at Samuel. Do you know how many times he's scratched himself bloody? I just pulled 7 broken fingernails out of his hair. Samuel clenched his fists. I've been busy. I put ointment on it. Toothpaste, menthol balm. People online say it helps disinfect. Carlos shook his head and pulled out his notebook. What exactly did you use? You didn't take him to the doctor for 10 days. Any use of antibiotics? No, Samuel snapped. No antibiotics. They're all chemical poisons. I don't trust doctors. They're just out to sell drugs. Lucy was so angry she could barely speak. Eleanor, still near the door, stepped forward and blurted, what kind of father is that heartless? Samuel turned to her, eyes narrowed. I raise my kid. What would you know? I don't care, Eleanor said bluntly. Just look at the kid. He's scared, curled up like a beaten cat. You think nobody sees that? A young paramedic with a beard, Luke, interjected, we need to transport him immediately. If we don't treat the infection within the next 2 hours, there's a real risk of sepsis. Lucy leaned down and stroked Daniel's hair. Can I go with you, sweetheart? Daniel whispered without opening his eyes, if Dad lets me. Lucy turned to Samuel, her gaze hard as steel. I'm going. He needs someone with him. You can choose, either come with us or stay here and let the law decide. Carlos stepped in, cutting her off. I'll ride with Lucy and the boy to the hospital. Mr. Samuel, I need you to stay so we can take your initial statement. Samuel shook his head, but Carlos was already speaking into his radio. Dispatch, send a patrol unit to 27, Clark Street. We have an uncooperative adult on site. Lucy followed the stretcher toward the ambulance. Eleanor gently touched her arm. Lucy, if you need anything, I know a doctor at Mercy Hospital. Call me anytime. Lucy nodded her thanks and stepped into the vehicle. Daniel wheezed, his mouth open like he wanted to speak, but no words came. Luke buckled the stretcher straps, then looked at her. Are you his mother? Lucy shook her head. No. I'm just the hairdresser. Luke didn't press further, but his eyes made it clear right now, to Daniel, she was much more than that. Inside the ambulance, Isabel inserted an IV and administered the first dose of antibiotics. His response is weak. His body's exhausted, she whispered to Lucy. Lucy held Daniel's hand, which trembled slightly. You can rest now, sweetheart. We're almost there. The boy gently shook his head, lips pressed tight. A single tear slipped from the corner of his half-closed eye. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let my head get so dirty. Lucy's heart broke. She couldn't speak. At the police station, Carlos led Samuel into a soft interrogation room. Officer Mary Vance, a woman with short hair and a serious expression, was already present to assist. Mr. Samuel, she began, you're currently under suspicion of medical neglect involving a minor. You have the right to remain silent and to an attorney. Samuel waved his hand. I don't need a lawyer. I'm just a single dad. I can't afford to run to the hospital every time my kid coughs. Mary opened a laptop, typing quickly. But you can afford to buy unverified medicine off the internet, yet not antibiotics from a free clinic? Not even take him to a public health center. Samuel shrugged with a bitter laugh. You think I want this? I lost my job. I've got no one. His mother's gone. It's just me trying to manage. I use what I've got. Carlos clasped his hands on the table. This isn't about poverty. This is about denial and neglect. Your son is in the ER. He can't sleep. He can't stop scratching because of the infection. Samuel slammed his hand on the table. I didn't hurt him. I didn't beat him. I'm just tired. I don't know how to be a father. Mary looked at him for a long moment, then spoke softly. That's exactly why people ask for help. But you didn't. And now, things have gone too far. At Mercy Hospital, the ER was filled with the sound of machines and the smell of disinfectant. Daniel was brought into the pediatric dermatology wing. A doctor, Matthew Harris about 50, with thick glasses and a calm, deep voice approached Lucy. You brought the child in? Lucy nodded. I noticed the wound while cutting his hair this morning. He hadn't had any treatment at all. Dr. Matthews' face grew stern. He has stage 2 cellulitis. If it hadn't been treated within 24 hours, it could have led to systemic infection, necrosis, or internal complications. Lucy's legs weakened. Oh my God. We've started 4 antibiotics, fluids, and he's under close monitoring. He's weak, but heart and lungs are stable. Thankfully, you brought him in just in time. Isabel, the nurse from the ambulance, approached and whispered something into the doctor's ear. He nodded, then turned to Lucy. We'll need to notify child welfare. Are you a relative? Lucy shook her head. No. But I can't leave him alone. Daniel lay in the hospital bed, eyes barely open. When Lucy came closer, he whispered, I'm sorry. I promise I won't mess up the pillow again. Lucy bent down and held his hand. Daniel, you don't need to be sorry. None of this is your fault. Daniel shut his eyes, tears sliding down his cheeks. Lucy remained at his side, even when the nurse asked her to leave. I'm staying, she said. Until he stops thinking he needs to apologize for being in pain. Back at the police station, Mary received a call from the hospital. She turned to Carlos. The hospital confirmed he was close to septic shock. Emergency medical response is underway. The case meets the criteria for child neglect prosecution. Carlos nodded. I'll prepare the file. We'll also need to contact child welfare to appoint a temporary guardian. Samuel sat slumped in the interrogation room, head bowed. For the first time that morning, he had nothing to say. The afternoon dragged on heavily at Mercy Hospital. Outside, the sky turned gray, and the first drops of rain tapped against the large windows of the pediatric unit. Inside, the cold white lights reflected off Daniel's tiny face, now drowsy under strong painkillers and antibiotics. His body was wrapped in blankets, yet he shivered lightly. Lucy sat by his bedside, exhausted but wide awake. She had never seen a child endure so much pain in such silence. Something in Daniel's eyes made her unable to stay still. It wasn't pity, it was a deep, burning anger. At Samuel. At a world that allowed this to happen without stepping in. The door opened. Carlos entered in plain clothes, looking like someone who had just left a tough meeting. Lucy, he said quietly. I need to update you. She stood up. How is he? Did the doctor say anything new? He's temporarily stable. But they'll need to monitor him closely over the next few days. Carlos paused, then added, we questioned Samuel further. He still insists it wasn't intentional. But child welfare is reviewing a temporary suspension of custody. Lucy nodded slowly. He deserves a lot more than that. Carlos glanced at the sleeping Daniel. I know. But everything has to follow legal process. Kids deserve protection, but adults also have a right to due process, no matter what kind of person they are. Lucy clenched her fists. That boy doesn't need legal process. He needs someone to love him. Carlos sighed. Do you know if there's any family who can take temporary custody? Do you know anything about his mother? No. Samuel said she left a long time ago. I don't even know her name. Never met her. Lucy frowned. What about extended family? Have you checked? We're in the process, Carlos replied. We found an old address in Springfield. It looks like Samuel's sister used to live there. His sister? Yeah, name's Margaret Jenkins. Around 40. We're trying to reach her. Lucy looked back at Daniel. Let's hope she still cares. Carlos added, someone from child welfare will be coming tonight. They want to ask you a few questions. Can you stay here until they arrive? Of course, Lucy replied without hesitation. I'm not leaving until I know Daniel is safe. Carlos placed a hand on her shoulder. Thank you. Not everyone would have done what you did. That evening, a caseworker from child welfare arrived, Beatrice Thomas, about 35, with curly black hair, round glasses, and a small tablet in hand. She was accompanied by a tall, silent nurse named Peter who stood by and observed. I'm Beatrice, she introduced herself, shaking Lucy's hand. We've been briefed on Daniel's case. I need to ask you a few questions about this morning. Lucy recounted everything from Samuel entering the barbershop, his behavior, the wound on Daniel's head, to the boy's words. Beatrice took notes, nodding slowly. When the boy said, "I'm sorry for being sick, can you confirm those exact words?" Beatrice asked. Not just once, Lucy said. He also said, "Dad said if I cry I'll get in trouble, and I won't dirty the pillow again. He thinks being in pain is his fault." Beatrice sighed, her tired eyes behind the glasses softening. I've heard so many of these stories, but it never gets easier. Children should never feel guilty just for existing. Lucy bit her lip. There are so many signs that Samuel has no idea how to care for him. Agreed, Beatrice said. And it's very possible he's been neglected for quite some time. Peter finally spoke, his voice deep. Neighbors confirmed it too. An elderly woman named Dorothy, who lives below Samuel, said she's often heard Daniel crying at night, but no one ever comforted him. Lucy nodded. I once saw the boy standing alone outside a pharmacy. His hands were full of scratches. I asked him what happened, and he said, "Dad told me to wait here." No one ever came. Beatrice was silent for a moment, then said, "We'll be requesting a temporary suspension of custody. While we verify any family connections, the child will be placed under the care of the city's Child Protection Center." No, Lucy said immediately. Please. Don't send him to a facility. Beatrice frowned. Ms. Lucy. It's not that I don't trust the center, Lucy continued. But the boy is scared. He's deeply hurt. If you put him in the middle of strangers, with cold fluorescent lights and crying at night, he'll break down. Beatrice stared at her for a long time. You're not a relative. We can't allow him to stay at your home. Lucy lowered her voice, eyes pleading. Then at least, please let me stay with him at the hospital for the next few days. Until a relative is confirmed. Beatrice sighed. I'll consider it. But if you're getting involved, you need to know this won't be simple. Lucy nodded. I don't need simple. I just need justice for Daniel. Meanwhile, at the police station, Samuel was taken into temporary holding. He didn't respond, didn't ask questions, didn't resist. He remained silent. In the monitoring room, Carlos sat beside Mary, watching the camera feed. He never hit the boy, Mary said. There are no signs of physical abuse. But neglect or even willful disregard can kill a child just the same. Carlos nodded, murmuring, worse than hitting. Because it's quiet. And it lasts. Mary opened a case file. When the court reviews this, Samuel might just be placed on probation, with mandatory parenting education. And in the meantime? Carlos asked. What happens to Daniel if there's no one else? Mary didn't answer. At Mercy Hospital, Daniel woke up in the middle of the night. Lucy sat dozing in the chair beside his bed. The boy turned his head, groaning softly. His eyes were still clouded from fever, but when he saw Lucy, he spoke in a faint voice. Ms. Lucy. She jolted awake. You're awake, sweetheart. Daniel looked around, lips moving slightly. Where's Dad? Lucy swallowed. Your dad, he can't be here right now. But you're okay. I'm here with you. The boy was quiet for a while. Then he asked softly, Do I have to go back home? No, she said firmly. At least not now. You're staying here, where it's safe. And no one's going to make you apologize for being sick. Daniel closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his cheek, soaking into the pillow. But this time, it wasn't from pain, it was from relief. The next morning at Mercy Hospital was unusually quiet. The rain from the night before had left streaks on the windows. In room 214, Daniel lay asleep on a white hospital bed, head resting on a thin pillow, both hands on his stomach, and 4 taped to the back of his left hand. Lucy hadn't left the hospital. She'd only stepped out to grab a cheap coffee from the cafeteria, then returned to her seat beside Daniel's bed. Around 3 a.m., his fever had returned. Not as high as when he was first admitted, but enough to leave him weak and groaning. "Ms. Lucy," Daniel's voice was paper-thin as he woke. Lucy leaned in. "I'm here. How are you feeling?" He furrowed his brow. "My head still itches. The doctor will be here soon. They'll make it stop." She gently touched his forehead, still warm, but better than the night before. The door opened. Dr. Matthew Harris entered with another doctor, Angela Morris, a pediatric dermatologist. Isabel, the nurse who had accompanied Daniel in the ambulance, followed behind. Dr. Morris was petite, wore round glasses, and had her hair tied neatly back. She smiled softly at Lucy, then turned to Daniel. "Hello, Daniel. I'm Dr. Morris. Can I take a look at the skin on the back of your head?" Daniel nodded quietly. Lucy helped him sit up while Dr. Morris carefully removed the gauze bandage. The harsh white light illuminated the inflamed area. Even Lucy, who had seen it before, had to turn her face away. Dr. Morris examined closely and nodded slightly. "It's worse than I expected. There's necrotic tissue around the wound's edges. The swelling has spread from the nape to the neck and is starting to reach behind the left ear. It's been developing for at least 10 to 12 days. Dr. Matthew added, "We're looking at stage 2 cellulitis. It could progress to stage 3 if we can't contain it in time. We'll need to monitor the antibiotic response hour by hour." Lucy gripped the arm of the chair. "Is it dangerous, doctor?" Dr. Morris responded with a steady, professional tone. "If not treated properly, it can lead to sepsis. Worse, if the necrotic tissue spreads, he could permanently lose sensation in parts of his scalp. But, we've started intravenous antibiotics. The critical part now is whether his body responds." Daniel whimpered softly. Dr. Morris leaned closer. "Does it hurt a lot, sweetheart?" "I'm okay," he whispered, clutching the bedsheet. Lucy couldn't hold back. "He's okay because he's had to live with this for over a week and no one helped him." Dr. Morris placed a hand gently on Lucy's shoulder. "You did the right thing. Now we'll take over. But you need rest. He needs someone strong beside him, not someone running on fumes." Lucy gave a tired smile. "I'm strong. It's just, my heart hurts." An hour later, Daniel was moved to a specialized treatment room. Nurse Isabel and another orderly, Jack, were in charge of cleaning the wound. Lucy wasn't allowed inside. She stood in the hallway, watching through the frosted glass. The sounds inside were muffled, but she could see Daniel flinch as someone touched his scalp. His face contorted not into a scream, but a tightly held whimper. His mouth moved silently. Lucy read his lips through the glass. "I'm sorry. I won't let it get dirty again." From inside, Isabel turned her head. Her eyes met Lucy's, sad, apologetic, helpless. That afternoon, Beatrice returned to the hospital from child welfare. With her was a new staff member, Andrew Callahan, a child neglect case supervisor. He was tall, with short curly hair and a weathered face. His steps were deliberate and heavy. "Lucy," Beatrice said, pulling a chair beside her. "We have news." Lucy looked up. "We reached Margaret Jenkins, Samuel's sister. She's living in Springfield. Divorced. No children." When she heard Daniel's name, she went quiet for a long time, and then started crying. "She's on her way to Chicago." Lucy exhaled, but her face stayed cautious. "Did she know Daniel?" Beatrice nodded. "She cared for him when he was very little. But lost contact after a falling out with Samuel. He's the type to blame everyone else," Lucy muttered. Andrew opened his notepad. Ms. Lucy, can you confirm one last time before the boy was brought to the hospital, did his father engage in any acts that would count as physical abuse? Lucy shook her head. No. But the boy was deeply afraid. No crying. No complaining about pain. Just silence and apologies. That is a form of abuse too. Beatrice took notes. We agree. And Margaret may be a viable guardian if she's truly committed. Lucy asked quickly, how soon could he be placed with her? Not immediately. We need to complete the legal paperwork, verify her living conditions. It might take a few days. Lucy glanced at the clock. I'll stay here, until everything's settled. Andrew said softly, I don't believe you're a relative. But I can tell the boy trusts you. And that's the most important thing. That evening, Daniel was brought back to his regular room after wound treatment. When Lucy walked in, he smiled his first real smile since they met. Are you still here? Lucy nodded. I'm still here. No matter how long the night is. Daniel nodded back, eyelids drooping. You're not, like other grown-ups. Why do you think that? She asked gently. Because, you didn't leave me. You touched my head, even though it was dirty. Lucy held his hand, her eyes red. No one has the right to make you feel ashamed for being in pain. No one. Daniel nodded again, this time with certainty. He closed his eyes and slept. For the first time, there were no whimpers, no flinches of fear. Lucy sat quietly in the dark, listening to the steady beep of the heart monitor, fragile, but still beating. The next morning, the sky remained overcast, a thick gray blanket covering Chicago. In a small office at the Cook County Department of Child Welfare, Samuel sat with his head down. His fingers tapped the desk rhythmically as if trying to stay composed. Across from him sat Beatrice Thomas and Andrew Callahan. Both were serious, concern evident on their faces. Mr. Samuel, Beatrice began, her tone measured, we'd like to better understand your situation in order to get a complete view of this case. This is an assessment interview, not a criminal interrogation. But your answers will directly affect your custodial rights. Samuel crossed his arms. What do you know about me that you think you can judge? I raised that boy alone for 8 years, he never starved. He got a rash, and you're acting like I tortured him. Andrew took steady notes, his eyes fixed on the page. You said he was itchy. Can you tell us when Daniel first started showing symptoms, and what they were? Around 2 weeks ago, Samuel answered, his voice dry. He kept scratching his head. I figured it was dandruff. So I bought cheap shampoo from the corner store. Beatrice followed up, did you ever see any bleeding, pus, or unusual smell? Samuel sighed. Yeah, there was discharge, and it smelled. But I applied ointment. What kind of ointment? Andrew looked up. Specific name? I don't remember. Some mint cream I bought at the flea market. Mixed in a bit of salt. My mom used to use it back in the day. Beatrice glanced at Andrew, then asked, did it ever cross your mind to take him to a doctor? Samuel shrugged. I've lost faith in the medical system. Hospitals are crowded, expensive, and full of scare tactics. I once took Daniel in just for a cough and ended up paying $100 full of meds he didn't need. Andrew tapped his pen against the clipboard. Are you aware that, under the 2006 Child Protection Act, delaying necessary medical treatment for a minor can constitute serious neglect? Samuel gave a bitter laugh. Laws, laws, laws. Why don't you try raising a kid alone on $900 a month? Beatrice softened her tone. No one's denying your financial difficulties, Samuel. But money is never a valid reason to let a child suffer from a serious infection for 2 weeks without treatment. He shot up from his chair. I didn't neglect him. I didn't hit him. I'm not one of those drunk assholes on TV smacking their daughters around. Andrew stood too, calmly. You're right. You didn't hit him. But sometimes, silence is worse than a slap. Your son apologized for being sick. He thinks it's his fault. That doesn't happen by accident. Samuel froze. For a moment, his expression wasn't guilt but helplessness. Beatrice continued gently, we've contacted your sister, Margaret Jenkins. She's on her way to Chicago. She may request guardianship. Samuel frowned. Margaret? What does she know about raising kids? She's never even come to a single one of Daniel's birthdays. Maybe, Beatrice said, but she cried when she heard about his condition. And she's coming, while you're still making excuses. He sank back into the chair, muttering, I have no one. No babysitter. No money. I'm just trying to get through the day. Andrew asked, in recent months, have you frequently left Daniel home alone? Samuel remained silent. Beatrice continued, neighbors have reported seeing him alone outside your apartment or sitting on the stairwell for hours. When asked, he said he was waiting for his dad. Do you admit this? Yes, Samuel muttered. But I told him to stay inside. He didn't listen. Beatrice stared at him. He's 8 years old, Samuel. He's not an adult. He doesn't know how to care for an infected wound, cook meals, or tell good people from bad. He's a child. Later that afternoon, Beatrice and Andrew visited the old apartment building where Samuel and Daniel used to live, in a damp, narrow alleyway on the west side. They knocked on a third-floor door. An elderly woman opened it, Mrs. Dorothy, over 70, with white hair and a cane in hand. Sorry to bother you, we're from child welfare. Did you ever interact with a boy named Daniel who lived upstairs? Mrs. Dorothy's eyes widened. Yes. That poor skinny boy always looked like he was about to cry but never did. I used to bring him cookies. Beatrice offered a soft, sad smile. Did you ever hear strange noises or witness anything unusual from his father's apartment? She sighed deeply. Plenty of nights I heard him coughing like crazy. One time, around 2 a.m, I heard knocking at my door. Opened it to find him barefoot, saying, I'm cold. Daddy locked the door and fell asleep. It broke my heart. Andrew jotted everything down. Did you ever report it? I didn't know who to call. I figured if I contacted the police, he'd be taken away somewhere. So I just hugged him, wrapped him in a blanket, and walked him back upstairs. Beatrice nodded. Thank you. What you told us is very important. Meanwhile, back at Mercy Hospital, Lucy was speaking with Isabel in the hallway. Daniel had fallen asleep after his antibiotic injection. Nurse Isabel, Lucy asked, have you seen a lot of cases like this? Isabel exhaled. More than I'd like. But Daniel, he's different. He didn't cry. Didn't scream. He just withdrew like he built himself a little invisible box to live in. Lucy nodded, eyes reddened. He's afraid to bother adults. Isabel took her hand. You broke through that box. No one else could have. That evening, in an empty office at the hospital, Carlos sat with a lawyer from the Department of Justice, Mr. Jonathan Eastman, assigned to oversee the legal aspects of the case. We have enough evidence to formally petition for custody suspension, Jonathan said. But for Margaret to gain guardianship, she'll need to demonstrate capability. How long will that take? Carlos asked. A few days, if everything goes smoothly. Carlos was quiet for a moment, then said, let's just hope Daniel doesn't lose faith in adults again before that happens. By midday, sunlight began to peek through. But inside room 214 of Mercy Hospital, no one noticed. Lucy sat in a plastic chair pulled up to the bed. Daniel lay still, breathing evenly after his morning antibiotics. His eyes were open, no longer feverish, but a haze still lingered. The door opened quietly. A tall woman with short, professional black hair entered, carrying a brown leather bag. Her name tag read, Sylvia Newton, child psychologist. Beatrice followed behind her. Lucy, Beatrice whispered, this is Dr. Sylvia. She's here to assess Daniel's psychological condition. It's necessary for the Protective Services file. Lucy stood and shook hands. Sylvia gave a gentle squeeze, then turned toward the boy with soft eyes. Daniel, she called gently. He didn't answer, only glanced at her cautious and guarded. Sylvia approached, not sitting opposite him, but instead lowering herself to the floor beside the bed, at his eye level. I'm not the doctor who checks your head, she said softly. I don't give shots. I won't touch your wound. I just want to sit here, if that's okay with you. Daniel looked at her, then at Lucy. Lucy nodded reassuringly. He didn't speak, but he didn't turn away just enough for Sylvia to understand that meant yes. My name is Sylvia, she continued, her voice as gentle as wind. My job is to talk to kids who are tired, who are sad, who don't feel like talking. Not to catch mistakes. Just to listen. Daniel blinked this time, slowly. The light from the window brushed across his face. He said softly, will you tell my dad what I say? Sylvia shook her head. No. I won't tell anyone who scares you. I'll just write in a notebook to help the doctors understand you better. But only if you let me. The boy hesitated. Then gave the faintest nod. Sylvia opened a small notebook. How did you feel when you woke up this morning? Itchy, Daniel replied faintly. But not as much as yesterday. Did you dream about anything? He shook his head. Then added, I don't want to dream. Because if I dream, I'll wake up, there again. Where? Daniel didn't speak. His eyes drifted slowly from the ceiling to his palms. In the old apartment. Where the window creaks. Where Dad sleeps all day. Where I'm not allowed to open the fridge too much. Sylvia didn't write. She just asked gently, why weren't you allowed to open the fridge? Dad said, the fridge uses too much electricity. If I open it, the cold escapes. I could only take water. Not allowed to open it longer than 3 seconds. Lucy bit her lip. Beatrice sighed and turned away. Sylvia continued, were you ever hungry, Daniel? He hesitated. Then said, I ate lunch at the hospital already. Rice, carrots, and pudding. Did you like it? Yes. A pause. Then he added, barely above a whisper, but I didn't eat it all. Because Dad said not to eat too much. Lucy nearly stood up, but Sylvia gently motioned for her to remain seated. She asked, why not eat too much? Because people will think you're greedy. Because then you'll take someone else's share. Because eating too much makes you a burden. Sylvia nodded slowly. Do you think you're a burden, Daniel? He didn't answer. But his eyes were turning red. Lucy stepped forward to hold his hand, but Sylvia subtly shook her head. Daniel, the doctor said in the gentlest voice, has anyone ever told you that you were bothering them? The boy nodded. Who? Daniel turned his face into the pillow. Dad, many times. When I coughed. When I asked about Mom. When I cried. And what did you do after that? Kept my mouth shut. Bit my tongue. Clenched my fists. Slept while hungry. Stopped asking questions. Didn't cough in front of him. Sylvia let out a soft breath. You've been so strong. You tried your very best not to bother anyone. But Daniel, children are allowed to need others. Daniel was quiet, then turned to Lucy. He spoke like a confession, yesterday, I ate pudding. I didn't ask for permission. I thought, you left and weren't coming back. Lucy couldn't stay seated. She took his hand. No, sweetheart. I only went to get some water. I would never leave you, not even for a day. Daniel looked at her, then at Sylvia. So, if I'm hurting, am I allowed to say something? Sylvia smiled her first smile since entering the room. Not only are you allowed to say something. You have to. Because now, you have someone who's listening. That afternoon, Lucy sat in the hallway. Sylvia stepped out, closed her notebook, and sat beside her. He's very intelligent. But his defense mechanisms are in overdrive. Daniel doesn't know where the line is between enduring and surviving. Lucy asked softly, will he ever be okay again? Sylvia exhaled. Physically, likely. But emotionally, it'll take time. And love. You're the first person who's made him feel like he's allowed to exist without apologizing for it. Lucy clenched her hands. I've never been a mother. But when I looked at him, I knew I had to do something. Not because I'm good. But because I couldn't turn away. Sylvia smiled sadly. And that's exactly what makes you different. A little later, Beatrice and Carlos arrived at the hospital with official news from the court. A temporary suspension of Samuel's parental rights had been approved, pending trial. Margaret Jenkins, Daniel's paternal aunt, had been preliminarily approved as a potential guardian. Lucy received the news with a mix of relief and worry. Is she coming? She's on her way. She'll be here tonight, Beatrice replied. Does Daniel know? Not yet, Carlos said. We wanted him to be stable before telling him. Lucy nodded. Let me tell him. If it's okay, I'd like to be the one to say it. Beatrice smiled. You've earned his trust, Lucy. Carlos added, and you've proven you're much more than just a hairdresser. Lucy didn't smile. She simply looked at the door to Daniel's room. He's been quiet for too long. If no one speaks up for him now, then silence will be all he's left with. That evening, the streetlights outside Mercy Hospital flickered. A dull yellow glow stretched across the cracked walls, while an early summer breeze slipped through the ajar door of room 214. Daniel lay still, not asleep. His eyes were half open, staring at the ceiling, his breath soft and steady as if trying not to disturb anyone. Lucy sat beside him, reading a picture book aloud. She knew he wasn't really listening, but she read anyway. Sometimes, children just need to hear an adult's voice like a heartbeat beside them, not to understand the words, but to know they're not alone. A soft knock at the door. Beatrice stepped in, her face slightly tense, as if she carried news but didn't know where to start. Lucy looked up. What is it? Beatrice glanced at Daniel, then stepped closer and whispered, the court officially ordered Samuel's detention. He'll be held in Cook County Jail until the investigation is complete. Lucy exhaled slowly. Did he say anything? Beatrice nodded, voice low. He asked for one phone call. We allowed it. And he only asked one thing, did Margaret really come? Lucy looked toward Daniel. She did, didn't she? She's on her way. Yes, Beatrice confirmed. Margaret Jenkins just got off the train at Union Station. She'll be here in about 30 minutes. Lucy gave a slight nod. I want to be the one to tell him. Beatrice hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. He needs to be prepared. You can't just expect him to recognize her the moment she walks in. Beatrice understood. She stepped back and gently closed the door. Lucy turned to Daniel and put the book down. Daniel? He turned toward her, unsurprised. Dad got arrested, didn't he? Lucy paused. Who told you that? I heard a nurse whispering in the hallway. Lucy nodded. Yes. But not because he's a bad person. Sometimes, even grown-ups need to be taught better. Daniel looked down at his hands. Am I going to an orphanage? No, Lucy replied quickly. There's someone coming to see you. Someone very special, your aunt. Her name is Margaret. Daniel blinked. She still remembers me. Lucy smiled. She used to hold you when you were just a baby. And yesterday, when she heard your name, she cried. She's coming now to see you again. Daniel turned his face into the pillow. What if she doesn't recognize me? Lucy gently rubbed his back. Then I'll be right there. And I'll help her remember. Half an hour later, the elevator at the hospital chimed. The door slid open, and a woman stepped out. She wore a light brown coat, her curly hair wind-tousled from the train. Margaret Jenkins, Samuel's sister around 40, her face weary from the rushed trip, but her eyes lit up when Beatrice greeted her. Is Daniel here? She asked. Beatrice nodded. Room 214. He's waiting. Margaret said nothing else. Her strides were so fast she nearly ran. She stopped at the doorway, hesitating. Her hand trembled. Beatrice placed a hand on her shoulder. Go in. He needs you. Lucy looked up as the door opened. Daniel was lying on his side, facing away, but turned as soon as he heard the sound. His eyes met Margaret's. For a few seconds, no one said a word. Daniel, Lucy called softly. Your Aunt Margaret is here. Daniel sat up slightly, still staring at the woman in front of him. Margaret stepped forward. You've grown so much, she said, voice shaking. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. Daniel didn't answer. He just asked, barely audible, do you still remember me? Margaret nodded quickly, tears falling. I remember you. Every birthday, I saved a little cake for you. But your dad never answered my messages. Daniel pressed his lips together. Then, like a branch finally reconnecting to its roots, he whispered, I remember you sang lullabies, and orange perfume. Margaret sat on the edge of the bed. She removed her scarf, took a small bottle of citrus-scented perfume from her coat pocket, and sprayed it on her wrist. This one. You still remember? Daniel nodded. Then he reached out, his first time doing so since being admitted, and hugged her tightly. Margaret trembled in his arms. Lucy turned away, her eyes stinging. Beatrice whispered, I think, he's finally found where he belongs. That night, the doctors allowed Margaret to sleep in the room next door. As Lucy prepared to leave, Daniel called out, Ms. Lucy. She turned. Yes, sweetheart. You'll still come back, right? Lucy stepped closer and knelt beside him. I'll be back. Every single day. I'm not going far. Daniel nodded slightly, then added, here. I don't have to say sorry for being in pain anymore, right? Lucy couldn't speak. She simply squeezed his hand and nodded, tears falling onto his fingers. Margaret stood silently, her own eyes wet. Lucy looked up at her. Take him somewhere peaceful. Don't let him ever learn to be silent again. Margaret nodded, voice steady. I won't let anyone make him apologize for being a child. That night, in a cold holding cell at Cook County Jail, Samuel sat on the metal bed, his hands clutching his head. A guard, Luke, passed by and paused. Want to make another call? Samuel didn't respond. Luke added, your son, he woke up. He's getting better. Ms. Margaret arrived. Samuel looked up. Did he ask about me? Luke shook his head. Don't know. But he's asleep now. Still holding on to her wrist. Samuel bowed his head. For the first time, there was no defiance. Just a man, in silence, being hollowed out from the inside. 3 weeks after Margaret arrived in Chicago, Daniel was officially discharged from Mercy Hospital. That day, the sun shone gently, and the pale blue sky looked like a promise of something new. The boy sat in the back seat of the car, the window slightly open, the breeze brushing through his hair. The sores on his scalp had nearly healed, leaving only a few pale pink patches on the back of his neck. He wore a small blue knit hat, a gift from Nurse Isabel. "Are you feeling okay?" Margaret turned and asked, her voice full of tenderness. "Yes," Daniel replied, looking out the window. "Where are you taking me?" "To my home," Margaret smiled. "Springfield. It's not too far. There's a garden, some cats, an apple tree, and flan. The kind you like." Daniel smiled softly for the first time, smiling in front of an adult who wasn't Lucy. Margaret saw it and tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her heart still ached when she remembered the first time she saw him again, thin, timid, and the way he'd asked, "Do you still remember me?" as if he'd been forgotten for far too long. The car turned onto a narrow dirt road leading into the outskirts of Springfield. A pale cream-colored house appeared between two tall rows of trees, simple, but warm. Daniel got out of the car, still holding the small fabric bag that contained his few belongings, a sketchbook, an old comb, and a drawing Lucy had given him. "Do you want to see the garden?" Margaret asked, opening the gate. Daniel nodded, eyes widening at the sight of a lavender-lined fence and two cats lazing on the front steps. "That one's Matthew," Margaret pointed at the white cat. "And the chubby one is Rosita. They're equally lazy." Daniel giggled. I've never had a cat before." "Well, now's the time to start," Margaret said. "I think they're going to like you." Inside the house, Margaret showed Daniel to his own room, a small space with a large window facing the garden, green bedding, and a desk with an empty picture frame. "This is your room. You can draw, read, do anything you want." Daniel stepped in, set his bag down, then turned back, hesitant. "Can I lock the door?" Margaret paused, then knelt to meet his eyes. "You don't need to lock it. But if you want to, I'll respect that. Here, you have the right to your space." Daniel nodded softly. Something inside him, something small but important, began to loosen. The next day, Margaret took Daniel to a dermatology clinic in Springfield. The doctor was a middle-aged man named Dr. Julian Fernandez, originally from Texas, with a warm voice and a playful sense of humor. "Hey there, little prince," he said as soon as he saw Daniel. "Next time, bring sunglasses, your handsome head is reflecting too much light." Daniel gave a shy smile and looked at Margaret. She nodded, encouraging him to relax. Dr. Julian examined the scalp and nodded approvingly. "Healing nicely. Keep applying moisturizer for a few more weeks, and avoid direct sunlight. And remember, absolutely no scratching." "I'll try," Daniel said softly. Julian looked at him and added, "You know, nobody is born knowing everything. But everyone has the right to learn again, even grown-ups. Especially the ones who hurt you." Daniel nodded. This time, his eyes didn't shy away. A week later, Margaret took him to a children's art class in town. It was held on the second floor of the public library. The teacher, Irene, had messy red hair, sharp eyes, and the warmest smile. "You must be Daniel," she said, kneeling to his level. "I heard you're a great little artist. Is that true?" Daniel glanced at Margaret, then gave a small nod. "Well then," Irene smiled, "let's begin. Today we're drawing the place where we feel the safest." Daniel sat down, picked up some colored pencils, and began to draw slowly, cautiously, like he was afraid to make a mistake. But as the first lines appeared, everything started to take shape. 20 minutes later, he put the pencil down. The drawing showed a yellow house with open windows, a woman watering flowers, two cats napping at her feet, and a child at a desk drawing. Irene came over and asked, "Where's your safe place?" Without hesitation, Daniel answered, "Aunt Margaret's house." Margaret stood by the door, her eyes stinging. She turned away so he wouldn't see her, wiping her tears. That night, after dinner, Daniel hung the drawing on his bedroom wall. It was different from the old one with the hospital or Lucy cutting hair. This one showed the kitchen, the garden, and, scrawled in messy handwriting, "I'm not afraid to go home anymore." Margaret looked at him. "Do you miss Lucy?" "Yes," Daniel nodded. "I want to send her the drawing. Then we'll go to the post office tomorrow. Want to write something on the back?" The boy thought for a moment, then wrote on the back of the picture, "Thank you, Miss Lucy, for not leaving me. Daniel." Meanwhile, in Chicago, Lucy's barbershop on Clark Street still glowed with warm light. Lucy was closing up when the bell above the door rang. The mailman handed her a small brown envelope. From Springfield. Lucy opened it. Inside was a drawing of Daniel smiling, standing beside Lucy as she cut hair surrounded by bright colors. The words on the back stunned her. She burst into tears, unable to stop. Eleanor, her longtime client getting a rinse, stepped forward. "Lucy, what is it?" Lucy held out the drawing. Eleanor looked and fell silent. "He drew you." Smiling. Lucy wiped her tears. "He's smiling, because he doesn't have to apologize for being in pain anymore." She quietly hung the picture behind the register where everyone could see it. 2 months after Daniel left Mercy Hospital, life in Springfield had settled into something peaceful, like the wound had never existed. Daniel now had friends at art class, slept and ate regularly, and sent Lucy handwritten letters every week like steady heartbeats she once feared she'd never feel again. In Chicago, spring arrived early. Trees along Clark Street unfurled tender green leaves, and Lucy's barbershop was once again buzzing with customers. But Lucy was no longer just the woman with scissors. She had become a quiet symbol of courage in the neighborhood. One Friday afternoon, as Lucy was organizing appointments, her usual mailman Ethan walked in, holding another small envelope. "Another one from Springfield," he said with a grin. "Someone really misses you." Lucy took it, smiled her thanks, and opened it behind the counter. Inside was a new watercolor painting. Lucy stood beside a barber's chair. In the mirror's reflection, a little boy smiled brightly. On the corner of the paper, the same loving scrawl read, "Thank you, Miss Lucy, for not leaving me. Daniel." Tears welled up again. Lucy turned away, wiping her eyes quickly. Eleanor, the oldest regular in the shop, looked up from her mirror. "Another letter from your special boy?" Lucy nodded. "He's drawing. And he's living. Every picture, it's like a heartbeat getting louder." Eleanor smiled. "You should frame them all right here. Let people know kindness still exists." Lucy nodded softly, then hung the new drawing right behind the cashier counter, beside old black and white photographs. The colorful picture stood out like an unspoken declaration. The following week, Lucy received an unexpected call from the Chicago Department of Culture and Social Affairs. "Hello, this is Martha Hill from the Department of Culture and Social Affairs," a formal voice said. "Ms. Lucy, you've been nominated for this year's Courageous Citizen Award. We'd like to invite you to the recognition ceremony next week." Lucy froze. "Me? I'm just a hairdresser." "That's exactly why you were nominated," Martha said. "We've reviewed the case file involving young Daniel Jenkins. Without your actions, the outcome could have been very different." Lucy was silent for a few seconds, then asked quietly, "Who nominated me?" "No one stated it outright. But I believe, it may have been an 8-year-old boy named Daniel." 1 week later, at the old Chicago City Hall building, the award ceremony was held formal yet warm. Inside the historic wooden hall, over 100 guests were present, ranging from social workers to everyday citizens. Lucy stepped onto the stage wearing a simple black dress, her hair tied back. She stood at the microphone, clutching a folded speech she had written, torn up, and rewritten over the course of 3 sleepless nights. "Hello," she began, her voice trembling but clear, "I'm Lucy. Just an ordinary person living in Pilsen. I cut hair." A few people chuckled softly. Lucy went on. That day, I meant to do something simple, give a boy a haircut. But when I saw the wound and the look in his eyes, the one that said, "Please don't leave me alone," I knew I couldn't stay silent. She paused, took a breath. Some people call me brave. But honestly, I was scared. I was scared that if I didn't speak up, that boy might never get the chance to speak again. And I thought, if I, just an ordinary person, didn't do anything, then who would? The hall fell silent. Lucy continued. Today, that boy is healthy. He's drawing. He's eating pudding. He's raising cats. And that happened not just because of me but because of everyone who didn't turn away, the police officer, the nurses, the social workers, the neighbors, and a courageous aunt. She looked out into the audience. Margaret sat in the third row, arms wrapped around Daniel, who wore a white shirt and had his hair neatly trimmed. The boy looked up at Lucy and beamed with the brightest smile she had ever seen. Lucy nodded gently and concluded. I'm no hero. I'm just one part of a chain of small actions that can save a child from silence. And I hope, after today, more people will choose not to stay silent. Applause erupted like a wave. Some people stood. Margaret wiped away tears. Daniel clapped, then leaned over to whisper to her, "She's way better at speeches than you." Margaret laughed, pulling him close. Because she speaks from the heart. After the ceremony, Daniel came up on stage with Margaret. He held a new drawing, this time a wide view of the award ceremony stage, with Lucy standing under the lights. "Ms. Lucy, I have another gift for you," he said, handing her the drawing. Lucy bent down to receive it, too moved to speak. "I drew you as a superhero," Daniel explained. "No cape, no powers. Just scissors, and a really big heart." Lucy laughed through her tears. "Thank you, Daniel. But I think that heart came from you." Daniel shook his head. "No. You already had it. You just didn't hide it that day." Elsewhere, Samuel Jenkins sat in the courtroom at the Chicago Family Court. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, his prison uniform unable to hide the constant slouch of defeat. Judge Alicia Robles read from the file and stated, "Based on medical records, witness testimony, and the psychological report of the minor, the court hereby permanently terminates Mr. Samuel Jenkins' parental rights to Daniel Jenkins." Samuel bowed his head. He didn't protest. He didn't cry. Not a word. The judge continued. "Guardianship is hereby granted in full to Ms. Margaret Jenkins, the child's paternal aunt, in accordance with the child's expressed wishes and her demonstrated fitness to provide care." Samuel looked up and slowly nodded. For the first and perhaps only time, he did the right thing, letting go of something he no longer deserved to hold. That evening, back in Springfield, Daniel hung a new drawing on his bedroom wall. He turned to Margaret, who sat near the window reading a book. "Auntie, can I draw one more?" "Of course, sweetheart. What will it be?" Daniel thought for a moment. "A drawing of everyone who helped me. You, Ms. Lucy, Nurse Isabel, Officer Carlos, Dr. Morris, Ms. Beatrice." Margaret smiled. "What will you call it?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "The people who didn't stay silent." This story carries a powerful lesson about courage and civic responsibility. Sometimes, the smallest act, refusing to stay silent in the face of someone else's pain, can save a life. Children don't need perfect adults. They need ones who listen, who step in when they can't speak for themselves. Neglect is a form of violence. And love, even when it comes late, can still heal. Most importantly, never ignore a child's discomfort or distress. It might be their final cry for help.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.